of their nuclear reactor, and the IAEA remains present and observing that that freeze is in place. So the basis for our negotiations are continuing, and we've taken a few steps now to put in place the elements of a final resolution that would resolve the nuclear issue between ourselves and North Korea.
And what is the U.S. agreeing to do in return in this interim phase?
Well, the North Koreans are going to move to replace their current reactors with light water reactors. We are going to provide assurances that they will be able to develop and construct those reactors and finance those reactors. And for that, the North Koreans will end forever reprocessing their nuclear fuel and essentially give up their capability to be a nuclear power.
I'm sorry, now let me just make sure I understand. What you're saying now is this is what you hope will be the ultimate deal.
That's right. These are the elements of a final resolution. So we're putting in place the final package. All of that package is not yet in place, and many details have to be worked out. So this is a step towards that final resolution, a very important step, but still much to be worked out in the final details.
Would you say this is a breakthrough?
I'd say this is an important step. It's not a breakthrough because the deal won't be made until the whole deal is made, till all the elements are put in place, and there are still important details to be worked out, an important step.
Let's look at some of these major elements. First on the North Korean side. Now, there were these 8,000 spent fuel rods that were taken out of that reactor, 6 weeks ago or whatever, and put in these cooling pools. What is going to happen? And of course, they could be reprocessed to make nuclear fuel. What's happening to those 8,000 rods?
Well, right now, those rods are in the fuel ponds, as you suggest. They're not going to be reprocessed during the time in which we continue to work out the details. And one of the issues still to be worked out is what happens to those fuel rods. And we are hoping that those fuel rods will be shipped out of the country, and so we're working out the details of that. But at a minimum, they're not going to be refueled, and that's what's important today.
But aren't they corroding and deteriorating in these ponds? Doesn't something have to be done with them?
Well, they're corroding. Actually, we don't know precisely what's happening to those fuel rods. We've offered technical assistance to the North to understand better how to preserve those rods so that there are no dangers to those rods. But right now, the important point is the rods are there and they're not being refueled.
Then you also mentioned that the reactor from which they were taken won't be refueled now, and they were constructing 2 larger new reactors. They will halt that construction, correct?
Well, they are not halting that construction today, but as an element in the final resolution, they will forego further construction of those 2 reactors and the reprocessing facility that they also have. So this is part of the final resolution, not today.
I see. So from now till September 23rd, when you go back to new talks in Geneva, the construction continues on those?
There is probably some construction still going on, but again, we're looking towards the time in September when we can put the final package back together, all the elements, and so we would hope that at that point in time, with our assurances with respect to their light water technology reactors, that they would then stop that construction and pledge no more reprocessing.
Just so I understand, in this interim in the next 5 weeks, is there really anything new, or is it really just simply a continuation of the freeze that's been in place for the last 6 weeks?
Well, in any negotiation, you have to start at the beginning and put together the whole set of elements. Between now and the next round of these discussions, we will have experts meetings, North Koreans coming to the United States, perhaps some Americans going to North Korea. And so a number of expert discussions will be taking place. So there's a real process is underway and towards bringing about this final resolution. It's not just a single set of negotiations and then 5 weeks hiatus. There's negotiations, experts, another set of negotiations.
But I mean the situation on the ground over there, nothing changes. That's basically...
Well, that's the most important part, is that they aren't, during this period of time, going to be able to make more nuclear materials.
Now, what about the issue that precipitated this crisis in the first place, which was, of course, the international community's demand to find out whether they diverted plutonium way back in '89 and have used that to make 1 or 2 bombs, as I guess the U.S. suspects. Are they still denying access to the sites for inspectors, the kind of access it would take to find out what has really happened, what really happened in '89?
Well, one of the important elements that has been agreed last week in the discussions is that North Koreans will be a party to the NPT and carry out their
the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
The Non-Proliferation Treaty, then carry out their agreement under that treaty with respect to their obligations to the IAEA. So that's the basis upon which we will understand and learn what's happened in the past. and carry out these special inspections.
And so you interpret that to mean that they do have the intention to allow this kind of inspection?
Well, I would be the last to interpret precisely what it is that's in the minds of the North Koreans, but they've agreed now to this element, very important to a final resolution of this crisis, and one that is essential. They understand that it's essential. That is, we need to understand what's happened in the past, as well as prevent anything happening in the future.
Now, if we turn to what the U.S. or international community is agreeing to do, there's some discussion in some news reports about opening, the U.S. and North Korea opening liaison offices in one another's capital. What's the timetable on that? Does that start happening right away?
Well, what happens right away is that one of the experts groups will be laying out the details of that. So we will starting to put behind that goal the specificity necessary to make that happen. But it will be one of the elements of a final resolution. So at this point, until all is agreed, nothing actually starts happening with respect to implementing these elements. But we would hope that in the coming few weeks to put the details behind that particular element.
So can you imagine, though, that the U.S. would ever do that part of it before, say, getting access to these suspect sites and finding out what happened in '89?
Well, the whole sequencing will take some more negotiations because, of course, it's going to take a fair number of years to actually construct this light water reactor. So it is a period of time in which we will be sequencing in these various parts of the package, and that still has to be worked out.
So can you imagine, I mean, will everything have to go forward at the same time, or could you imagine the U.S. as a carrot actually agreeing to open these liaison offices before getting the full transparency, in the term of art, the full knowledge and access to these suspect sites?
We have to understand clearly what's been happening in North Korea's nuclear program, and that's part of the package. Also part of the package will be their foregoing nuclear reprocessing, foregoing the construction of these reactors. So I can't tell you precisely today exactly how they'll be sequenced, but I can say that we'll have to have a common understanding of the full package and the full implementation before any of the steps actually get underway.
And now you've mentioned a couple of times the light water reactors that would be replacing the current reactors in the north, and of course the South Korean president today offered to provide one, so did the Russians. The North Koreans, I gather, would rather get it from the Russians. Is that it? And is that true, and not be dependent on South Korea? How do you see that working out?
Well, I think at this point the American assurance is the most important first step. And in that context, the Vice Foreign Minister suggested that he would be open to the possibility of a South Korean reactor. And so a very important step now has been the South Koreans offering this today. That is, helping in the construction, the technology, and the financing. And so we're starting to put together the whole package, and that's what the U.S. role is to make good on the move that the North Koreans have agreed to do, and that is to replace their old reactors with this new light water reactor.
But again, is that something that would wait for the whole package to be negotiated and sort of signed on the dotted line before it would go forward?
We're going to start the expert talks on this subject as well with the North Koreans, and then working with our allies and friends to put together the whole consortium and package to make this possible. So nothing's there till we have all the pieces, but all the little pieces are starting to fall in place, and that's what's important for what's happened today.
And now, a light water reactor is preferable. Why? Because what it produces as its spent fuel cannot be used to make nuclear weapons?
Or very difficult to use the material to make nuclear weapons, in contrast to what is produced by these graphite reactors that the North Koreans have today and are constructing for the future.
I see. And tell me, Ms. Davis, could you tell anything yet about this new leadership we have in North Korea, or they have in North Korea? Could you tell anything yet in your negotiations about what direction they're moving in?
Well, the most important is the continuity from the great leader now to the new leadership, in that they came back to the negotiations, picked up where they left off, and were able to move as quickly as we were last week to the elements of this agreement. But beyond that, it's very difficult still to probe behind what's happening and what the new leadership is exactly about.
And why do you think that in just a week's time you were able to get this agreement?
Well, because we're putting together a package that serves the goals of both sides. That's what negotiators set out to do. And that's what we're beginning to put in place with this negotiation.
But I mean, the North Koreans have been pretty difficult to deal with in the past. Why do you think, what was new here that the U.S. was offering?
Well, we'd always said if we got back to this negotiation, we would look for a broad and thorough approach, to resolve all the issues on both sides. We had that opportunity now, and it looks like we're beginning to put in place that broad and thorough approach.
Well, Madam Secretary, thanks very much. Thanks for being with us.
Nice to be here. Thank you.